Hello again and welcome to AI Conversations. This is the YouTube channel where we attempt to give the various AIs out there a workout on detailed technical or scholarly subjects. Today we'll have Andrew ask ChatGPT about climate change skepticism and where she thinks things will go.
What are the compelling arguments that climate change is not anthropogenic and that humans are powerless to impact it?
The overwhelming scientific consensus is that climate change is largely driven by human activities, particularly the emission of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels. However, it's important to note that there are some arguments made by a small minority of individuals or groups suggesting that climate change is not primarily anthropogenic, human-caused, and that humans are powerless to impact it significantly. These arguments often lack robust scientific support, and the mainstream scientific community strongly supports the view that human activities are a major driver of climate change. Here are a few arguments that skeptics may present. Number 1. Natural climate variability. Some argue that the Earth's climate has always experienced natural variations and that the current changes are part of a natural cycle. While it's true that natural factors can influence climate, the rapid and unprecedented changes observed in recent decades are inconsistent with natural variability alone. Number 2. Solar influence. Skeptics may point to variations in solar radiation as a potential driver of climate change. However, studies have shown that the recent warming trends cannot be explained solely by changes in solar activity. Number 3. Incomplete understanding. Some argue that the science of climate change is not settled and that there are gaps in our understanding. While scientific knowledge is always evolving, the consensus among climate scientists is strong, and the evidence supporting anthropogenic climate change is robust. Number 4. Natural carbon sources. Skeptics may claim that natural sources of carbon dioxide, such as volcanic activity, are significant contributors to the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. However, the scientific measurements indicate that human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, are the primary source of the recent increase in carbon dioxide levels. Number 5. Economic concerns. Critics of aggressive climate policies may argue that the economic costs of mitigating climate change are too high and that alternative approaches should be considered. However, many studies suggest that the long-term costs of inaction on climate change are likely to be far greater than the costs of mitigation. It's crucial to recognize that the overwhelming majority of climate scientists and scientific organizations, such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, support the conclusion that human activities are the primary driver of recent climate change. The scientific consensus is based on a comprehensive assessment of multiple lines of evidence, including temperature records, greenhouse gas measurements, climate models, and paleoclimate data.
Despite your arguments, there seems to be enough dissent to stymie any meaningful action to mitigate climate change. What is likely driving that intransigence?
The intransigence or resistance to meaningful action on climate change can be attributed to a combination of factors, often intertwined and complex. Here are some key reasons. Number 1. Economic interests. Certain industries, particularly those associated with fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, may resist climate action due to concerns about potential economic impacts on their profits and employment. Transitioning away from fossil fuels can be perceived as a threat to existing business models, and some companies may resist change to protect their financial interests. Number 2. Short-term thinking. Political leaders, especially those with short electoral cycles, may prioritize short-term economic gains over long-term environmental concerns. The benefits of climate action are often realized over the long term, while the costs and disruptions may be more immediate, making it challenging for policymakers to take bold actions. Number 3. Political ideology. Climate change has become a polarized political issue in some regions. In certain political climates, there may be a reluctance to endorse policies associated with environmental regulations or international cooperation, with some viewing such measures as government overreach or a threat to economic freedom. Number 4. Lack of public awareness or concern. if the general public is not sufficiently informed about the urgency and severity of climate change, there may be less pressure on policymakers to take bold action. Public awareness and understanding of the science, risks, and potential solutions are crucial for driving political will. Number 5. Misinformation campaigns. Some groups, often with ties to industries that might be adversely affected by climate policies, actively promote misinformation about climate change. This can create confusion and sow doubt about the scientific consensus, leading to public and political skepticism. Number 6. Global coordination challenges. Climate change is a global issue that requires international cooperation. Achieving consensus among countries with diverse interests, economic structures, and levels of development can be challenging. Negotiating and implementing effective global agreements, such as the Paris Agreement, face significant political obstacles. Number 7. Technological and infrastructure challenges. Transitioning to a low-carbon economy requires significant investments in new technologies and infrastructure. Some argue that these changes may be too costly or technically challenging. However, advancements in renewable energy and sustainable practices are addressing these concerns over time. It's important to note that the landscape is dynamic, and opinions on climate change are evolving. Many businesses and governments are recognizing the economic opportunities associated with transitioning to a sustainable, low-carbon future. Efforts to address climate change are gaining momentum, but overcoming the barriers to action remains a complex and ongoing process. Public engagement, policy advocacy, and international collaboration are essential components of creating meaningful change.
Would it be fair to say that humans, as an aggregate, simply lack the will to mitigate climate change?
It wouldn't be accurate to make a blanket statement that humans, as an aggregate, lack the will to mitigate climate change. The issue is complex and multifaceted, involving a wide range of stakeholders with varying levels of awareness, priorities, and capacities to address the problem. Here are some nuances to consider. Number 1. Diversity of perspectives. While there may be resistance or inertia in some sectors, many individuals, communities, businesses, and governments around the world are actively working to mitigate climate change. There is a growing awareness of the urgency and severity of the issue, leading to increased advocacy, policy changes, and technological innovations. Number 2. Generational shifts. There is evidence that younger generations, in particular, are more concerned about climate change and are demanding action from governments and businesses. As these generations become more influential in shaping policies and making decisions, there may be a shift towards more proactive climate mitigation efforts. Number 3. Local and regional initiatives. Some regions and local communities are taking significant steps to reduce their carbon footprint, invest in renewable energy, and implement sustainable practices. These initiatives often reflect a bottom-up approach to climate action. Number 4. Evolution of public opinion. Public opinion on climate change is dynamic and can change over time. Major climate events, scientific reports, and increased media coverage have the potential to shift public sentiment and generate greater support for climate mitigation measures. Number 5. Emerging technologies. Advances in clean energy technologies and sustainable practices are providing more viable and cost-effective alternatives. As these technologies become more accessible and economically attractive, they can contribute to increased will and capacity to address climate change. While there are challenges and obstacles, it's essential to recognize the ongoing efforts and positive trends in addressing climate change. Public awareness, education, and engagement are critical components for fostering the collective will needed to implement meaningful climate mitigation measures. The transition to a sustainable future requires a combination of individual actions, community initiatives, corporate responsibility, and effective government policies at various levels.
While everything you say is true, there is enough resistance to block meaningful measures before tipping points are reached. While it is true that there are highly motivated individuals and groups who desire to address climate change while it is still possible, there are enough dissenters in the mix to block their efforts.
Your observation is accurate. the challenge of addressing climate change is indeed compounded by resistance and dissent in various forms. Overcoming this resistance and achieving meaningful measures in a timely manner is a complex task that requires navigating political, economic, social, and cultural factors. Here are some additional considerations. Number 1, political will and leadership. Effective climate action often requires strong political will and leadership at national and international levels. Governments play a crucial role in setting policies, regulations, and targets that can drive systemic change. However, political considerations, short-term interests, and competing priorities can impede decisive action. Number 2, economic interests. The fossil fuel industry and other sectors with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo may resist changes that could impact their profitability. Transitioning to a low-carbon economy may face resistance from those who fear economic consequences, such as job losses in traditional industries. Number 3, global cooperation challenges. Climate change is a global issue that requires coordinated efforts from nations around the world. Disparities in economic development, historical contributions to emissions, and differing national priorities can hinder international cooperation. Number 4, public engagement and awareness. Building public support for climate action is crucial, as politicians often respond to public opinion. However, misinformation, lack of awareness, or competing priorities may hinder efforts to mobilize widespread public support. Number 5, institutional inertia. Existing institutions and systems may resist change due to established structures, practices, and vested interests. Bureaucratic inertia can slow down the implementation of new policies and strategies. Number 6, time constraints. The urgency of climate change requires rapid and decisive action. However, the political and bureaucratic processes can be slow, and there may be a lack of alignment between the necessary speed of action and the pace of decision-making. While there are substantial challenges, it's important to recognize ongoing efforts and progress in various sectors. Advocacy, grassroots movements, technological advancements, and international agreements demonstrate that positive change is possible. Overcoming resistance involves a combination of strategic communication, policy innovation, economic incentives, and fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the planet's future. Ultimately, addressing climate change will likely require a combination of top-down policies and bottom-up initiatives, with a focus on building broad-based coalitions that can navigate the complexities and challenges inherent in the pursuit of sustainable solutions.
Given the current state of the playing field and the urgency as we march toward tipping points, is it likely or even possible to address this problem in time? I'm looking more for a prediction here.
Making predictions about the future, especially concerning complex global issues like climate change, involves a considerable degree of uncertainty. The trajectory of efforts to address climate change will depend on a myriad of factors, including political will, technological advancements, public awareness, and international collaboration. As of my last knowledge update in January 2022, I don't have real-time information on the most recent developments. However, I can provide some general considerations. Number 1, urgency of action. The urgency to address climate change is widely acknowledged, particularly as the world approaches potential tipping points and irreversible impacts. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and other scientific bodies have emphasized the need for rapid, ambitious, and sustained efforts to limit global temperature increases. Number 2, growing recognition. There has been a growing recognition of the climate crisis, with increased public awareness, grassroots movements, and corporate commitments to sustainability. This momentum can contribute to political pressure for more robust climate policies. Number 3, technological advances. Advances in clean energy technologies, energy storage, and sustainable practices are continually evolving. If these technologies become more accessible, affordable, and widely adopted, they could accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy. Number 4, policy developments. The adoption and implementation of ambitious climate policies at national and international levels are critical. The effectiveness of policies, regulatory frameworks, and incentives can significantly influence the pace of emissions reduction. Number 5. International cooperation. Climate change is a global challenge that requires coordinated efforts. International agreements and collaborations, such as the Paris Agreement, play a vital role in fostering a unified approach to addressing climate change. Adaptation strategies. In addition to mitigation efforts, the development and implementation of adaptation strategies to cope with the impacts of climate change are crucial. Building resilience to climate-related risks can help communities better withstand the challenges. While progress has been made in some areas, significant challenges and barriers remain. The timeline for achieving meaningful results will be influenced by the collective will and action of governments, businesses, communities, and individuals. Predicting the future course of climate action is inherently uncertain, and success will likely depend on the ability of society to overcome obstacles and implement effective strategies promptly. Many experts argue that the window for avoiding the most severe consequences of climate change is narrowing, emphasizing the need for immediate and transformative action. The situation calls for ongoing vigilance, advocacy, and a commitment to sustainability at all levels of society.
If humans fail to mitigate climate change, how would you assign percentage blame between technical and human intransigence?
Assigning a percentage blame between technical challenges and human intransigence, unwillingness to change or adapt, in the event of failure to mitigate climate change is a complex task and involves a subjective assessment. The interplay between technical challenges and human behavior is intricately linked, making it challenging to separate them neatly. However, we can consider some general factors. Technical challenges, e.g., lack of technology or infrastructure. Percentage of blame could vary but might be assigned, for example, 30%. Rationale. While significant progress has been made in developing clean energy technologies and sustainable practices, there are still technical challenges to overcome, such as energy storage, transportation, and industrial processes. In some cases, the absence of viable alternatives might contribute to the difficulty in achieving rapid decarbonization. Human intransigence, e.g., lack of political will, resistance to change. Percentage of blame could also vary, but for instance, 70%. Rationale. Human factors, including political will, resistance to change, and economic interests, often play a substantial role in the failure to address climate change. If decision-makers prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability, or if there is significant resistance to adopting alternative practices, this can impede progress. It's important to note that these percentages are illustrative and not based on precise measurements. Moreover, technical challenges and human intransigence are interconnected. For example, political will can influence the allocation of resources for research and development of new technologies. Likewise, the availability of effective technologies can influence the feasibility of policy implementation. Ultimately, the success or failure to mitigate climate change involves a complex web of factors, and any attempt to assign blame in percentage terms is an oversimplification. A more constructive approach may involve recognizing the multifaceted nature of the challenge and focusing on collaborative efforts to address both technical and human-related barriers. This includes fostering a societal shift towards sustainable practices, supporting innovation, and promoting policies that incentivize low-carbon solutions.
Well, as you can see, climate change is a complex, nuanced issue. One that ChatGPT handled well and didn't shy away from. Asking her to make predictions and assign theoretical blame is something that other generative AIs often punt on. Until next time, this is Conversations with AI. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your friends and enemies.